Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world, one book at a time. Today, we're looking at the system of dogmatic religious belief through Sam Harris's incendiary book, Letter to a Christian Nation, and why he argues its influence on public policy represents nothing less than a moral and intellectual emergency. So, in this short but really potent book, neuroscientist Sam Harris gets right to the heart of what he sees as the core problem. And it's not just about belief itself, but a system of belief, one that runs on absolute certainty and is, well, perfectly insulated from evidence. You see, the crucial point here isn't just about what any one person believes. It's about how that whole system of belief actually functions when it scales up across an entire society and starts writing the rules for everyone. Okay, let's get into it. Harris kicks things off not with some complex philosophy, but with some pretty stark data, just to show that this system isn't some fringe element. No, it's a powerful, mainstream force in American life. I mean, think about this. He points out that even after a century of overwhelming scientific evidence about the age of the Earth, over half the U.S. population believes the entire cosmos was created just 6,000 years ago. That right there shows you the power of this system. And it's not just about the distant past. Harris also brings up the 44% of Americans who fully expect Jesus to return in the next 50 years. He argues this creates a system where, a worldly catastrophe might not be seen as a problem to solve, but as a welcome sign of a glorious event to come. So this is what's really interesting. How does the system maintain its certainty, especially when faced with contradictory evidence? Harris argues it basically functions by building a kind of immunity, an immunity to the very idea of evidence-based doubt. And he uses this brilliant analogy to illustrate it. He asks the Christian reader to just consider why they dismiss the claims of Islam, even without definitive proof. And then he asks them to recognize that that exact same standard of skepticism, well, that's precisely how an atheist views the claims of all religions. All right, let's switch gears to the system's moral framework. Harris's argument is that this framework isn't based on the tangible, real-world suffering of humans and animals. Instead, it's based on divine commands that are found in Scripture. He shows us passages like this one from the Old Testament, which literally commands death for heresy. His point is that if we're supposed to take the Bible as a literal moral guide, we run into some deeply, deeply problematic instructions. And then he puts that right next to a single, clear precept from Jainism. And this is to highlight a really crucial point. Other moral systems exist that, in his view, are just far more effective at the simple goal of preventing harm. Harris really drives this home by pointing to the Bible's explicit approval of slavery. He argues that the system just flat out failed what should have been a very easy and obvious moral question. So why does this system persist with so much strength? Well, Harris identifies this powerful structure of incentives and constraints that creates a kind of protective shell around the core beliefs. So the primary incentive is the promise of salvation. That's a reward of literally infinite value for accepting the system's main ideas, even without evidence. You could say the stakes just couldn't be higher. And the core constraint? It's the idea that doubt itself is reframed as a moral failing. This effectively insulates a believer from the whole process of critical thinking, which is, the foundation of science and reason. Then he identifies a crucial feedback loop that reinforces the whole structure. It's the social respectability that we tend to give to moderate faith. He says this provides the necessary cover and legitimacy for the more extreme and dangerous versions of the exact same dogma. Harris's entire analysis really builds towards a single powerful metaphor that lets us understand this whole structure as one unified, predictable system. You can think of it as kind of moral operating system, but it's running on ancient, unchangeable code, Scripture, that isn't designed to process or integrate new data from science or reason, and that inevitably leads to outputs, moral judgments, policy stances that can be dangerously out of sync with the modern world. Ultimately, what Harris's book helps us do is notice the system itself. It gives us a lens to see past all the individual arguments and instead analyze the underlying structure of a belief system that continues to shape our world in really profound ways. And this perspective, it really changes the conversation. It shifts the focus from the believer to the belief. And it makes us ask a critical question about that system's compatibility with a pluralistic, scientific society. This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon. For a longer audio-based analysis of this topic, see the deep dive linked in the description. If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.